Hey there students, thank you for being part of this presentation. My name is Elba and today we're looking at world history, Napoleon Bonaparte, 1799 all the way to 1815. What will we learn today? Today we are going to explain Napoleon's rise to power, the role of geography in his defeat, and the consequences of France's defeat for Europe. Let's move on. From the year 1789 all the way to 1804, France experienced revolutionary changes that transformed France from an absolute monarchy to a republic and then to an empire. The success of the American Revolution and the impact of Enlightenment ideas such as individual liberty and the consent of the governed led people to question rule by absolute monarchs. Peasants, as well as the bourgeoisie of the Third State, believed that Louis XVI tax system was extremely unfair, and at the States General, Louis XVI raised taxes to solve the financial crisis, and the Third State rebelled against the king. Remember that France was going through horrible problems as they had no money to continue to survive. So in order to fix this problem, Louis XVI decided to tax the Third State, the state with the least money, and therefore people rebelled against the king. The Third State formed the National Assembly and demanded that the king agree to a limited monarchy. Starvation, frustration, and fear led the peasants to storm the Bastille in 1789. When the king refused to work with the parliament, the National Convention was formed, and Louis XVI was executed in a guillotine, as you can see at the images to your right. The leaders of the new republic turned radical and began a reign of terror. By the late 1790s, France was in chaos. The republic failed to solve problems, and foreign nations were at war with France. Napoleon Bonaparte seized power in 1799 and created a European empire. This is the rise of Napoleon to power, basically. But who was Napoleon and what was his impact on Europe? Let's see. And here you have a map that shows you the states that were established by revolutionary France and how it transformed the landscape in Europe. When Louis XVI was executed during the French Revolution, many European nations attacked France to keep revolutionary ideas from spreading all over Europe. In the midst of all of this chaos in Europe, a military officer named Napoleon Bonaparte successfully defended France and became a military hero. You're more than welcome to pause this video and read about Napoleon Bonaparte biography. As you can see here to your right, explains what he did, how he came to power in the nation of France. But the French Republic lost confidence of the citizens, and in 1799 Napoleon staged a coup d'etat, or an overthrow of the French Republic, and assumed power as a dictator. In 1800, the French people voted in favor of a new constitution that basically made Napoleon a consul of France, and this was something new in France. Napoleon made a series of reforms to improve the government, the economy, and the lives for French citizens. To fix the French economy, he introduced a fair tax system and a Bank of France to regulate the money supply. Very important reforms in France that were introduced by Napoleon. He created a merit-based system for government bureaucrats. In other words, people who became part of the government had to be qualified and not just be anybody that was known to a politician. and therefore he could get a job in the government. But in this case, government positions were awarded by merit only. He also created public schools for students of all backgrounds. He issued a comprehensive set of laws called the Napoleonic Code that provided order, freedom of religion, and eliminated privileges by states. In 1804, Napoleon ordered an election and the French people voted Napoleon Emperor for life. But Napoleon was very ambitious, as he wanted control of a global empire in North America as well as Europe. You can see the political cartoon to your left. You have Napoleon trying to basically control the entire world. Despite the fact that Napoleon wanted a global empire, the revolution in Haiti convinced him to abandon North America. In 1803, Napoleon sold the Louisiana Territory to the United States for $15 million. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States. As you can see from the map to your right, you have the original United States basically after the Revolutionary War, and to the left you have the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, and it basically doubled the size of the United States. During the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon showed his military genius by defeating Austria and Prussia, and on top of that conquering Spain, Italy, and also Central Europe. If you see the map here, you basically have everything that Napoleon did. Now let's look at number 1 here in the map, and it says in the year 1804, Napoleon crowns himself Emperor of France. Number 2, from 1805 to 1806, Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden form alliances against France. Number 3 says 500,000 troops die or desert Napoleon during the Russian campaign. Number 4 says 1804, Napoleon is sent into exile, escapes the next year. And at number 5, to the left on the map, you see that Napoleon loses at Waterloo and dies in a second exile. So this is basically what Napoleon did throughout his rule in France and throughout his mission to conquer the world or form an empire in this case. During his rule over Europe, Napoleon made a number of devastating decisions. The one nation Napoleon could not defeat was England, and he was not happy about that. He ordered a blockade called the Continental System to cut off all trade with England. If you can see on the map there, you see the French flag basically surrounding most of Europe there, from Norway all the way to Italy, basically in the Mediterranean Sea. That this blockade was designed to hurt the economy of England. But at the end of the day, the Continental System completely failed, and it actually hurt the French economy more than the England's economy. Now, Napoleon's insistence that nations obey French laws led to a rise in nationalism and uprisings against France. In 1812, Napoleon made his greatest mistake and decided to invade Russia. But the harsh winter and Russia's scorched earth policy devastated the French army and forced Napoleon to retreat. Here you have some images of Napoleon invading Russia. You see how soldiers were dying. It was extremely cold, and this was one of Napoleon's biggest mistakes because he basically lost all of his army. Here you have an image that shows you Napoleon's Russian campaign in 1812. You see that on June 1812, Napoleon decided or entered, and you see that through the blue arrows, Napoleon decided to enter Russia with 422,000 soldiers. And within a matter of months, Napoleon made it all the way to Moscow. But by the time he was there, he had lost so many of his men, and they were devastated basically. On September 14th, 1812, Napoleon enters Moscow to find it in ashes. torched by the Tsar. He waits hoping to induce the Tsar to surrender, but the Tsar never surrendered. And on October 18th, 1812, Napoleon, frustrated and his military starving, having waited too long for the Tsar, the 100,000 survivors of the Grand Army began their hellish retreat throughout the cruel Russia winter. If you see how the military was retreating with the red arrows, that indicates the movement of his troops in this case, back out of Russia. By December 6th, 1812, Napoleon's troops marched for the Niemen River with only 10,000 men who made it back out of Russia. Devastating defeat for Napoleon in this Russian campaign. In 1814, the weakened French army was defeated. Napoleon surrendered basically and was forced to give up his throne, and was also exiled to the island of Elba. When Napoleon was exiled to the island of Elba, also the French monarchy was restored, but the new king, Louis XVIII, was very unpopular, and in 1815 Napoleon escaped and regained the French throne. With only 100 days after Napoleon's return, he built a new army, but was defeated by a European coalition at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Here you have this crucial battle that basically transformed Europe, transformed France, and that Napoleon was defeated when all European nations came together and said, you know what, we're going to stop Napoleon for once and forever, basically. And that Napoleon was sadly defeated. After his defeat, Napoleon was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he died after 6 years of being there. But Napoleon was very famous and very important in French as well as European history. Let's look at what was Napoleon's impact in France. First, Napoleon created reforms that ended the financial crisis and unequal class system and made public schools in a law code. Second, his massive empire brought glory to the French people. Third, his rise as an emperor ended the enlightened ideas of democracy that led to the French Revolution. And fourth, the fall of empire led to a conflict between rule by strong monarchs and democratic governments. We have come to the end of this presentation. Please make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next presentation.